While we're on the topic of courts, Joe, you had another
Yeah.
court-related story.
Yeah. So we were talking about courts and whether or not they go back to normal because lawyers will want them to go back to normal and be the same old courts they always were. Maybe that's a bad idea. This comes from our friends out west. I've been talking over the last year or so. I struck up some conversations with Sound Jury Consulting, and they do a lot of data driven analysis of juries. One of the things that they did was a comparison because in Seattle, they have Zoom trials going on. And as it turns out, the virtual trial world, they're getting statistically significant younger and more diverse jury pools when it's online than when it's in person. They are still digging into why that would be, but some of it could be just in a COVID world, those folks reply to things they might not reply to if it was in person. But another alternative hypothesis is that the Zoom day takes less time out of the day so that people who otherwise would say, I can't take this time. I got to go do this work. I got to do that work, which happens to be younger people with lots of debt and often minority potential jurors. They aren't having that problem now. And so they are showing up and being part of the jury pool, which means that we have a ton of issues with the way our juries are constituted and whether or not they actually look like the jury of the peers that they're supposed to be. Virtual trials seem to be making some headway into fixing that. And for Seattle, the non-white population of the jury pool is now almost what the actual population of the city is, as opposed to usual when it's something like 82% white. As it's been pushed back to where the actual demographics suggest it should be if you took a random sample, which strikes me as a reason. I understand that in person, there's a lot of benefits to being in person, but there's at least some argument that perhaps virtual trials, we were talking about hearings, which I agree with the cattle calls and everything being the most obvious place, but maybe there is a reason for at least some trials to be virtual or a hybrid model or something, because it seems to be doing better for the jurors. And I'll say I actually got approached after I wrote that article by a family law judge in not in Washington, in Middle America, who was like, can you put me in touch with those people? I need that data. I want our family court hearings to stay virtual because we sometimes have trials, and like we have commented that the jury pool for the trials that we have in these family court things is better. And he's like, but it's all been anecdotal. I just need somebody with like a real large pool of data, which it's not Los Angeles County, but King County, Washington is a pretty big one. So there are people out there who think there's a value to this, and the jury argument is the best one I've heard.
It not only is the jury more representative, but your article suggested that by sort of skewing the jury pool to a younger age, that can actually affect how they decide cases.
Well, now that brings it to the fact that the people collecting the data are jury consultants. So their mindset is as useful as this data is for us generally as journalists. Their mindset was, how does this affect potential clients? And I actually talked to these people during the height of COVID when they were suggesting that they were seeing the world as in for a lot of big business verdicts at that time as states would open up, but have a no excuse for people not to go because COVID. And so they were saying, what we're seeing is a bunch of largely old white conservative people are the only people showing up because they think COVID's a myth. But that means that the verdicts tend to be very pro-business and so on. So that was what was going on then. But these same folks now dealing with the Zoom trials are saying that it actually can be a little bit more representative of a pool. And with younger folks, one that's less sympathetic to the business having cut off somebody's hand, metaphorically or literally, as the case may be.
But the interesting thing about that is, that is true. The question sort of remains is, okay, you get more younger people that are able to participate, but then, there's still the risk that there's a big pool of people out there who might be called for jury duty in a physical world, but don't have the bandwidth, the internet connection to participate. And what's the possible skewing of the result there? But I mean, it's kind of great to hear that, I think, because that would suggest that there is reason for optimism about a certain percentage of trials being conducted online. And I, as a former litigator, I've for years have been concerned that we don't try enough cases. It's kind of become a forgotten art, and you can say, well, that's not terribly important, but it is important because, how do you properly value the exposure of the case, any case, unless you've got some metric to go by? I mean, has it just become a settlement value that you can't really quantify? I mean, historically, it's been, what would a jury do with these facts? And if we don't have enough data pools for that, then that's a problem. So if we can generate a way to have more trials, I think that's a good thing for us as a profession, actually.
I'll quickly say to your point about bandwidth that King County, Washington, one would assume is one of the more connected counties in the country. I mean, you're at the center of Microsoft. That's going to be better than some. So this may not be translatable to other places.
I'll just the courts that are doing a lot of the online jury work right now are looking at accessibility issues for the pool. So Texas in particular is really exploring this area to evaluate whether for sure they're also seeing wider reach and acceptance of jury summons, but they're evaluating who's not being reached.
I think it's fantastic, and I love how we're just part of this big grand experiment, and it's unexpected, but at the end of this we're going to have all this data that we never would have thought that we had to kind of help move the bar of justice further along, and provide access to justice to more people, and hopefully in a way that is more equitable. So it's
just gave me exactly the segue I was looking for.
Good point, because I
aim to please
this week about how mediators are enthusiastically embracing online mediation and how they've been so much more successful. And one of the reasons that was pointed out is people kind of behave themselves better. And, they don't pontificate and, go overboard. I mean, it's something about being on camera and, sitting at your desk, it's not less of a performance, and they're making a lot more headway. And Lord knows it's a whole lot less disruptive to have an online mediation. So that may be, Nikki, to your point, I mean, we may come out of this as that for mediation, that could very well be the new norm, both because it's easier to do and because it's more successful, apparently.
Yeah.